little tip that I like to pass along to traders, and that's really what we do here at Trading TuneUp. So again, want to welcome everybody, all of our market rebels, and for all of our YouTubers out there. It's great having you here as part of the group. So the thing that I like to show is in the academic side, we usually talk about path-dependent tools versus time-dependent tools. And it's kind of a subtle difference that a lot of traders overlook. And before I get into the presentation, I just want to make it very clear, I am not knocking stop orders at all. I'm just saying if you're going to use them, you need to be aware of what you're doing, right? That's a lot of, again, what this Trading TuneUp is about, to give people things to think about. Now, stop orders, I feel, are better suited for shares of stock. You have to be kind of think twice about them before using them with options. So why is that? Well, let's go find out. So that's what we're going to talk about today, are the stop orders with options. Well, that didn't work out well. Hold on a second. I don't know why that never shares. I clicked on it. Sorry about that, everyone. Hold on just a second. Okay, we got it there. Are we sharing now? Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Another little technical difficulty. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today is stop orders with options. So again, not saying that they're wrong, but I think there's a subtle aspect to using stops with options that most traders just don't consider. Now, for those of you in the webinars on Tuesday and Thursday, know that Stu and I get asked this question all the time and different tactics and techniques for using them. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, we give it the thumbs down and say, I would not use a stop order on options. All right, now again, to be clear, that is, I'm not saying that never happens. I'm saying in most cases, we are not going to use them. But the question is why, right? It sounds like stop orders are such a great idea because they limit losses. At least that's the idea. And on one hand, that's true, but on the other hand, you're missing one of the key benefits of an option to begin with. So let's talk a little bit first about a stop order. Let's say that you buy shares of ABC for $100, and you place an order to sell ABC at a stop of 95. I'm not going to be talking about the stop limits. I'm just going to be talking about the regular stop orders, but the same ideas would apply to a stop limit. So what this means is that you are going to sell your shares at or below 95. All right, so that's always part, and that's important, at or below. Sometimes traders think that that means that you are guaranteed to get 95. That would be way too good to be true. That would be a free option, free put option in that case. What it is, it's more of a line in the sand. What you're saying is that if the stock crosses this line or lower, it activates the order. So I often tell traders that the stop is nothing but a trigger. Do not think of it as the price that you're guaranteed to get. That is absolutely not true. So the thing that you have to be aware of, though, is that when we are talking about volatility or just random paths in general, there's a lot of variation that can happen, right? The path that we see, we always assume this is the only path that could have happened. So we get to the end of the year and we say, oh, look, the SPY is at this level. Well, there's a million different paths that could have happened. And so we always have to remember that we don't see those, but they absolutely could have happened. Now, here's a simulation in Excel with a hypothetical stock at 100 right here. So they're all starting at 100. We're turning it loose for 250 trading days, which is roughly the number of trading days in a year. We're going to inject it with 20% volatility. And look at the variation. So you can see that 2 standard deviations up is about 160, about what we would expect. Down here, getting close to, we got close to 60 in some cases. But that's just 20% volatility, which most people think, 20%, that's nothing. Oh, it's a lot. It's a healthy dose of volatility, even though that's kind of average for the VIX and the SPY. Take a look at 40%. Big, big difference. Lots of potential paths that we could see here. And you have to say, which one are we going to get? And we never know. And so that really sets up one of the ideas of options in the first place, is that there are so many potential outcomes that we could get, today being a perfect example. So we have to think about our bell curve. All right, so if we look at our bell curve, the current stock price is over the center of the bell curve. And most option traders who set, or at least stock traders who set stops, have this kind of a mindset. They assume that the very day that they buy that stock, it's going to do one of several paths in their favor. But if it doesn't come out of the gates moving in their favor, this is for a call option to the upside, they want to sell it. And so the idea is, again, it sounds good on paper, is to say, well, if it doesn't go in my way or in my favor right off the bat, let me get out of it and I'll try again. But what they fail to recognize is that there are going to be some cases that the very second you buy it, it's going to just do this. And there's really nothing you can do about those. Whether you're using a stop order for the reasons I just showed, right, at or below, it could come out of the gates the next day, like today, and just bottom out, and there's really nothing you can do. Never recovers. Well, a stop order wasn't going to save you from those anyway, whether you used a stop or not. So these extreme cases really doesn't matter if we had a stop in there or not. So the thing is that stop orders, where they can hurt you, is for all of these paths in between. So remember, there's a ton of paths. They don't either all go up or all go down. There are a lot of paths that will start out against you, but then move in your favor. And if you set that stop, you are absolutely going to miss 100% of these. So you have to, if you think of it just without getting into the nitty-gritty details, the chances that it just comes out of the gate here to the downside is really slim. So what we're really talking about is right here in this blue area, this 1 standard deviation mark, over to the left side, to the adverse side, where it starts out going against us, but then comes back, and sometimes with a vengeance, well into our favor. And we miss them. So again, today is a perfect example. Many people are out there speculating with puts. They get a little bit of profit, or maybe it goes a little bit against them, and they close it, not realizing that there are so many different possible paths that will happen and could have happened. So let's take a look at let's say a stop price. So let's say we set our stop at 95. So here's our stock. So if our stock is cruising along this way and it touches 95, this is our stop order, okay, at or below, what happens? We activate the order. And let's say that this path happens to go completely down. All right, so we're assuming that we had shares of stock, we get stopped out at 95. In this case, we're going to look back and go, I was an absolute genius. I knew it was going to go, or I knew I needed to put a stop in there, and it worked beautifully. Well, it's a little bit of a misperception. There were a million different paths that could have occurred. We just happened to hit one that looked good, and we now think that we've got some kind of a super trading strategy by using these stops. Where can it backfire? Well, for the reasons that I just showed. What if instead that we hit here, we get triggered out and we do this, but then we shoot up to the other side? So yeah, during this period, we're going to look back and go, man, I'm so glad I put that stop on. But as I always tell traders, the movie's not over. Just because you get stopped out and you feel good at that moment doesn't mean the stock can't turn around. And in probably 20 or 30% of those cases or more in the middle of that curve, they are going to reverse and come back in your favor. So the success of a stop order depends on the path of the stock. And in the academic world, we call that a path-dependent tool. And that's exactly what it means. The success depends on the path that the stock takes. Sure, we can paint a picture where there's times when it comes out looking rosy, and then we can also paint lots of pictures where it comes out looking like, the worst idea in the world. Which one are we going to have? We don't know. So then that raises a question, well, do we use a stop or do we not? So it comes down to that we need a crystal ball, and if you need a crystal ball to make a decision, it's a tough decision. It's not a good way to trade. But what if we had a put option instead with a 95 strike? All right, what if you had instead bought the 95 put instead of doing the 95 stop? Well, let's say that this is one particular path that the stock did, and notice that when the stock hit here, okay, here's our strike at 95. When it hit here, when it crossed that strike of 95, did we get triggered out like we would have on a stop order? Nope, we still have our put option. What about when the stock traded here? Did we get triggered out? Nope. We still have our put, even though it went even below our strike. We still have it. What about when it triggered here? Never lost our shares. Okay, so we have the ability to wait it out through time. And that is the subtle distinction that almost every trader misses. Yeah, again, in the academic world, we look at this, what you're really buying is this length of time through expiration. That's what you're buying. And so really your success depends on time. Was the option alive while the stock was wiggling around through all of these strike prices in there? That's the only thing it depends on. So this is what we call a time-dependent tool. All right, so a stop order is a path-dependent tool, while an option is a time-dependent tool. That's the subtle distinction, but it's a really powerful one. This is why you pay for options and you don't pay for stops. So there is value in waiting. So always remember, when you're dealing with options, yes, you have the right to exercise to buy or sell, but you also, equally important, have the right to not exercise. We have the right to walk away. All right, so one reason for paying for option premiums is for the right to decide whether we should buy or sell. That's a really powerful thing. It's a little bit, think about it if you were at the racetrack with horses and you had to lay your bets before the gates opened. That's one thing. But what if you could lay your bets as they're, coming down the home stretch, seconds away from crossing the finish line? That would be really valuable, and that's what you're getting with options. You get to wait and see how the stock, which path it has taken. You don't need to guess, we know it. So placing stops on options destroys the very benefit that you're paying for. And so what you're really doing, you have to realize that there's an advantage in waiting to see what happens because there are so many possible paths. And when you are trading options, if you are trading options, what you're really doing is you are making a path-dependent tool. You're making a time-dependent tool, an option, and you're trying to guard it with a path-dependent tool. And you have to say, well, why would I do that? I'm trying to get away from path dependency. I want it to be time dependency. So what we should do is we should guard an option with a time-dependent tool, not a path-dependent one. And so that's why in the webinars, we're always talking about ways that you can hedge, morph, alter positions, do ratio rights. It's not going to put you into a naked position, but we can maybe do ratio rolls. And we can get ourselves into situations where we can have a guaranteed gain but still stay in it. Why? Because there's so many possible paths that we never knew existed. So think about this. If this is today, and this is expiration, and we buy an option trading for 5, well, presumably the reason that we bought the option today is that we think something big is going to happen between today and expiration, whether it's to the upside or the downside. Well, think about that, and I want you to think very hard about this. We think something is going to happen between today and expiration. So think of this as maybe 10 different doors out here, or 30 different doors if you want to think of how many days until expiration. But then what happens is we say, well, I'm going to place a stop here. And so, or I could place a stop here or here. And we could, but we don't know what the option's going to be worth in the future. And the problem with this, or at least what people think they're doing, is okay, at this length, the option might be worth 430, would be worth 350 at the halfway point, would be worth 250 at the 25% point. So traders will say, well, I want to place this stop at 430, and that way I can limit my losses to 14%. Or I want to place it here at the halfway point to where I can limit my losses to 30%. Or down here at the 25% mark when I will have the option trading for half of its value. Right? When 25% of the time remains, the option will lose half of its value. It's going to move from 5 to 250. But we already said that we don't know what's going to happen between today and expiration. So if you think about it, by setting the stop back here, what you're really saying is, yeah, I know I told you it was going to happen out here 30 days from now, but because it didn't happen in the first 10 days, I want to get out. Well, where's the logic in that? If you thought something was going to happen in the first 10 days, why didn't you just buy a 10-day option and limit your losses that way? And they'll say, well, I want to get out if it's trading for 350. And that way I can limit my losses. So what you're really saying is that if the stock doesn't come out of the gates in your favor immediately, you want to get out, even that's only at the halfway point. You see, it starts to not make a lot of sense to say that I've got this time-dependent tool, but at some arbitrary point, I just want the stock market to trigger me out. Because again, we have so many different paths that could occur. So the thing we have to do is, the thing I want you to get from this presentation is at least think about your reasons. Stops turn time-dependent tools into path-dependent tools, and that's not really a good mix. Now again, stop orders are not necessarily bad, but you definitely need to consider your reasons for using them. If you're trying to use them just to limit losses, there are better ways without releasing this whole idea of a time-dependent asset. That's really such a big benefit as an options trader. So on a related note, I'm going to talk about some other things with options pricing that will help you make better decisions, but I think this is a critical one, and especially on a day like this. How many traders out there do you think were buying puts 2 or 3 days ago, get a little bit of a profit and say, I want to get, let me just take this profit. Or we got a little bounce and they say, I just want to get out. And they're looking back and going, my gosh, if I still were in that put option, it'd be worth so much money. Well, this is why we want people to cast a wide net and keep it open, but manage the risk. And for most cases, there are better ways to do it than with stops. Okay, so just make sure they're not conflicting with your goals. If you want to give yourself 30 days of time for something to happen and the market says that's worth $5, that's what it costs for 30 days worth of time. There's no shame in saying I have to get out of it because I've lost 10% or 20 or 30 or 50%. We know that that $5 option is going to go to zero at expiration. That's the value of time. That's because it is a time-dependent asset. So once again, if there are reasons that you're fearful of the size of those losses, there are better ways to do it than with stops. So with that, these are some of the things that we talk about in our Q&A on webinars, Tuesday and Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. But you can also get a free consultation with one of our professional coaches right there. Yes, you read that for free. 815-957-9125. All right, so if you want to know how a coach can help you, what we would call an assessment, you can speak to one of them and say, here's my situation. I'm a covered call writer, or I'm a speculator, or whatever. And they can say, well, here are some things to think about. You might go, I've never even heard this before. Gosh, if I'd known that last year, I would have made a ton of money. You will uncover gems that you've never heard before, and that's the benefit of having a coach. And also some of the things we're going to uncover in Trading Tune-Up. So please be sure to check